Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you see this podcast. This is another in our continuing series of race, culture, in the church. Race, culture, in the church. I want to encourage everyone to please start from the beginning. We started our series roughly a week after the death of George Floyd, after he was murdered. And we've had the privilege of speaking to different individuals in the community, Christ followers, non-Christ followers, but the whole issue that we're dealing with, if you could do a Venn diagram with circles, you would have race, you would have culture in the church, and in that intersection is where we're trying to speak to. So I am privileged for the second time. He's a man who needs no introduction. Chief Daniel Hahn, Chief of Police for our very own Sacramento, City of Sacramento. I encourage everyone to go back 3 podcasts and watch that, and you will see Chief Hahn's his intro, his background. But let me just suffice it to say, he is Sacramento through and through, born, raised in Oak Park. The building that we're in is quite familiar to him. And I'm just privileged, Chief, that you would carve out time to speak to us on this very important subject. So thank you and welcome again to City Church and to our series, Race, Culture, in the Church.
Thanks for having me. I agree. It's a very important topic.
Well, it's a new year. It's 2021, but it's kind of like Groundhog Day. It's like I'm not sure if it's if things have changed much. Same issues, new issues. Where are we? And I'd like you to speak to. There was an attack, an assault on the national Capitol on January 6th. And 2 things that just struck, again, under race, culture, in the church, 2 things that struck me, the imagery that was there, and I'm watching it, kind of slack-jawed, but afterwards, the memes and the posts in social media, I saw one where it was a big banner with a mob, and in the middle of the banner, someone was holding up a Jesus Saves banner. And I thought, wow, that's quite a juxtaposition right there. And then the other picture I saw was a man in the throng embracing a cross with his forehead leaning on the cross, either in thought or prayer, I'm not quite sure. But the imagery, and again, I can say I'm a turtle, that doesn't make me a turtle. I can say I'm a Christ follower, that doesn't make me a Christ follower. But to see the imagery in that crowd, we're in 2021. We've just left 2020. What's your take on things up to this point?
Yeah, probably the best way I could put it is same old, same old.
Okay, next question.
Well, I mean, if you don't work on something, why would you think it's going to change? So all the images that you just spoke out, but also, carrying certain flag, which we often call the Confederate flag, but in reality, it's the Confederate battle flag. Mm-hmm. It's not a Confederate flag, it's the battle flag. It's their war flag, where they fought against our country, and yet they were carrying it through the United States Capitol. One gentleman was wearing a T-shirt that said Camp Auschwitz. Correct. And the images just go on and on and on. And some of the things I heard from some of our quote-unquote leaders in this country when that occurred, or I should say soon after it occurred, was this was like Afghanistan or some third world country. That couldn't be more incorrect. That's America. Mm-hmm. That's who we are. It's not the first time something like that's happened. I'm not surprised that those people showed up. They've been in our city for 2 months leading up to that, doing those same sort of things. I was surprised they were able to get inside the Capitol so easy. But those sort of things have been living in our country, and all it took was one person to light the match, and then it became that. So we shouldn't be surprised. All those things didn't just materialize on November or January 6th. They've been here under just below the surface, and then they rear up every so often whenever somebody elicits the need.
So you don't think they've gone anywhere since January 6th?
No, they're waiting till the next thing to light them. Throughout history in this country, whenever there's tough times, the hate groups or the extreme groups rise in membership. Because in my opinion, I think people are looking for somebody to blame in tough times. And so, we've been in some tough times for almost a year now with COVID, with the protests. I mean, a lot of things happening at the same time. So we see people that are looking for somebody to blame. And we had a president that was more than willing to give them that.
What do you, I've heard folks try and draw a parallel between the insurrection on January 6th with some of the social movement protests since before, during, and after George Floyd's killing. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think we're in a very dangerous time right now, and it really words matter, and especially words of leaders and people that have a platform and a voice. And I think that's a convenient thing to say, that breaking into the United States Capitol, killing people with the intention of killing our elected leaders is the same as a Black Lives Matter protest or some sort of civil rights protest or social justice protest. As you know, we've been involved in those kind of protests for a couple years now.
Correct.
There's no comparison. And I think it's problematic because, before the election, we had elected leaders and community leaders that would speak out a little bit about some of the rhetoric, whether it's from federal government, the White House, or whatever, but didn't speak out a lot. But once the election was over and the president lost, some of these people spoke out a lot. But they only spoke out against the white supremacist, white nationalist groups like Proud Boys and some of them. But many of our leaders act like groups like Antifa don't exist, and that the people that are part of that thing that doesn't exist. I know this is confusing because it is confusing because they want to act like a group doesn't exist, but yet they're in our streets every day. That they are really just protecting us from the white supremacists. And although, as a Black man, and I'm sure many other people that aren't Black, white supremacy disgusts me and is something that I absolutely don't agree with. But as a police chief and as a human being, I also don't like people that are trying to hurt other people regardless of what their ideology is. And these other groups are doing that. And as long as we act like they don't exist, as long as we legitimize them, they will grow and they will continue to hurt and harm people. And so it's a little challenging since the 6th, where people want to condemn the white supremacy groups, which they should. But we should condemn everybody that's radical like that, everybody that wants to destroy our form of government, everybody that wants to harm other people to make a point. And these are largely white groups. Both sides are pretty much 100% white. And so one of my concerns is that whether it's Black Lives Matter, whether you agree with the organization or just with the purpose behind it, I agree with Black Lives Matter kind of purpose. I don't agree with everything the organization does to accomplish it, but I 100% agree that we still continue to need to get better in this country and live up to the ideals in our Constitution. But those groups were not destructive and trying to harm other people like the folks at the Capitol did. And we now have two groups, largely white, that have taken over the entire discussion, and you don't hear anything about about the need for equity and things like that unless you're hearing it from these groups, or at least the one group. And I've sat here in our protests and watched, typically in the early 20s, Antifa members that are predominantly white, most of which don't live in our city, yell at black officers that they're race traitors, yell at me that I'm a race traitor. And so when you really think about that, I don't know anything that is more white privilege or racist than that. So I have to go to you, a white person, to determine whether I'm black. I've been told that I make too much money to be black. I would say that's a problem too. So these are the groups that have taken over the discussion, and I don't think we're gonna get somewhere when the African-American voices, the Hispanic voices, the women voices are drowned out by these extremely radical groups that are self-admitted wanting to destroy our government. And so that's where we're at right now. And I think as leaders, we all need to call it out. Bad is bad, right is right.
Well, you did that. You did that now, just now, but you also did that a week ago before City Council. You were the pre-presentation, if you will, and you were very passionate, and you were very clear about how you viewed things, and I was really encouraged. Apart from just what you said, but the power of your conviction. And it really struck me. I've said it before, I say it now, and I'll say it when we conclude. I'm praying for you as a Christian to Christian. I am praying for you. I'm praying for your wife. I'm praying for your children. I'm praying for you in your position. Yours is not an easy position. So maybe you want to elaborate even more than you just did in terms of there was a lot of passion that you were expressing beyond the written word. Speak to that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I think probably two of my primary purposes for doing that was, one, I firmly believe that at the core and at the root, which is what I said that night, of what challenges us as a country, what ails us as a country, is the issue of race and difference. And the reason that is we've never dealt with it. We tell stories and teach our students and teach our kids through school that we're this like pristine country. And the horrible things we've done as a country, we kind of smooth over and don't make sound so horrible. For example, McGraw-Hill, the publisher of books, like high school history books, just last year in 2019, on the section on slavery, said that described slavery as workers who immigrated to this country. That was the definition in a history book for high school. I've done a lot of history, and I teach a history class on this. That's not what slaves were. So I'm pretty passionate that we've got to quit nibbling around the edges, and we've got to go all in and tell the truth, teach our history, and then we can deal with it. It's not about making people feel bad. It's a fact, what we did. It's not hard to find, and we need to address it. The other reason why I said that is, in my position after almost 34 years as a police officer, as you might imagine, I've had my share of disagreements with people, whether politicians, supervisors, employees, you name it, community people. I don't mind disagreement at all. Matter of fact, I think it's made me better. I think it makes us better to have disagreement, and even sometimes very passionate, angry, emotional disagreement. So I have an issue with that. What I have an issue with is when what our leaders, our politicians, our community leaders, leaders in general, put people's lives in danger with the words that they say and with their actions. And so by condemning one group, which rightfully so should be condemned, but legitimizing another group, they've killed people before, they'll kill people again.
Correct.
And they've thrown hammers at my officers. They've tried to drop bricks from upper floors from parking garage on the heads of officers. They've thrown fire at officers. They've burnt buildings. They're the group that's burning Portland and Seattle every day. And so I do take that pretty serious when people's lives are on the line. So when we think, it's not unusual to have a police car parked in front of my house. And with school out, my 2 daughters are there home alone doing Zoom while I'm at work. And there's a police car parked out in front. There's a reason why that police car is parked out in front. And people cause these death threats and threats to happen with their rhetoric. So when we talk about the president who encourages and lifted up these groups and mobilized them, but during that time, we also had congressmen and other leaders that either backed that up or just stayed silent. Neither one of them are good enough. And now we have leaders that are doing the same with the other side. And we have other leaders that are silent or back that up. They're both radical groups. They both want to hurt people. They both want to destroy our government. And by people, for selfish or political reasons, that support and legitimize a terrorist organization, a domestic terrorist organization, a gang, people are going to die. And we talk about homeless all the time. We had 2 homeless deaths the other day, which are tragic. Right. So why aren't we talking about these deaths? So if we, in our neighborhoods, in the neighborhood I grew up in, there's laws and things about committing a crime as part of a gang. You get enhancements to your sentences if you're in a gang and you commit a crime in furtherance of that gang. I don't know what the difference is that between these radical groups that post on social media what they're going to do, what violence they're going to commit, then they go commit that violence, and then they brag about committing that violence on social media. Yet we don't treat them like a gang. We don't treat them like a terrorist organization. They've openly said they're anarchists and want to tear our government down. The flyer in one of their latest protests said, no presidents. Didn't say no Biden or no Trump. It said no presidents. So the reason why I was so passionate is, one, I fully believe we have a reckoning to do in this country, and we haven't even started yet. And the longer we wait, the more pain we're going to see on our street, the more people are going to die, whether they're in protest or just in a neighborhood that doesn't have the same opportunities, so their life doesn't have the same chances as other people. But as long as we don't address this, we're going to continue to see this. This isn't the first time we've had protests like that. This is not the first time we've had cities burning. They've been burning cities. Protesters have been burning cities since the 1800s. And they've been saying the exact same thing as they're saying today. Equity, jobs, school, discrimination. And what are they saying now? Same exact things. We haven't progressed that far. And now we have some leaders that are not like the leaders we had, say, during the civil rights movement, where Martin Luther King and others were very purposeful, believed in nonviolence. But now we have people that are justifying that violence. Well, if you had treated me better, I wouldn't have had to throw a knife at you or burn your building down. And some of these groups even say it in the name of Martin Luther King. Yeah. I'm like, the man is rolling over in his grave when you put his name attached to that. So I just think we're in a very divisive time. And if leaders don't step up and speak the truth, we're not only going to stay the same, we're going to continue to get worse. And I think we talked about last time how blessed and privileged and honored I am because my mom and dad adopted me, and my mom raised me with all the values and things that she raised me with. And so I can't tell you how many times I've said over the last several months, my mom didn't teach me to know my place. So I'm going to speak truth every single time somebody asks me a question, or every opportunity I have. I have a platform. I have a position that requires me to speak the truth. And we're trying to walk the walk in the police department. We have a long ways to go, but we're doing a lot of things in the police department to address that issue, the issue of race and the issue of difference. But if we don't address it as a country, as a community, as a city and as a state, if the only group doing it are the police officers that live in the larger society, that keeps pumping these beliefs into our heads, these beliefs about certain groups of people and all those that are reinforced in us every day, our training will have less effectiveness. Our experiences will have less effectiveness unless we address it as a country. So that's where I was very passionate about that. And I think I made a few people nervous. I didn't tell anybody that. I purposely didn't read that to anybody in my department, in like my staff and the PIOs that always look out after me. They asked me if I was going to read it before council, and I said no, because you'll try to tell me not to do it. And so, because as you know, it probably wasn't what some people were expecting.
But it seems to be right on point. And again, to your point about being privileged to be raised by the mother and father that you had, and to be named Daniel. I'm thinking again, Daniel. He didn't back down. He responded to the requests made by the king to him. Daniel's just doing his job. But then you ask, and I give you interpretation. I give you what God says. So you are now in this very unique, rarefied situation. You were probably, I won't say a handful, but you're one of a handful of unashamed, Christian, Christ-following, African-American chief of police for a major metropolitan city. That's, talk about 1%, that's 1%. That's 1/10 of 1%. And you probably already answered it, but give you another chance and maybe expand on it. How has your faith shaped how you approach your responsibilities? Now, you said, shame on us if you're just leaving it to law enforcement to affirm, to keep in check the social, cultural norms. You're a Christ follower. How has your faith guided your work and how you approach your job and how you, again, speak passionately about the things that you do?
Yeah, I'll start with something you said a minute ago about my mom. My mom named me Daniel, and all of my siblings and I are named after names in the Bible. And you could not tell me any different that my mom named me Daniel for that very reason. Daniel was somebody that had an unshakable belief and faith and lived by that. And so I've always kind of lived by that. Haven't always known that I was living by that, but I don't typically make a lot of plans for the future. I just believe I'm where I'm supposed to be. And I believe I'm supposed to be here right now. And I believe my mom trained me to be here right now. And I believe, my mom was an organist and choir director in the church. And we were regularly in church every Sunday. And my mom lived every day, so therefore showing us every day that you have to do the right thing. And I know by myself I can't change everything, but it is my obligation, because so much has been given to me, to give to other people and be a voice for people that don't have a voice. And it's not always easy. Anytime you do something really meaningful, not very many people are going to support you, regardless of what opinion you have. Right. And you have to be okay with that. You have to have a strong belief that you're doing what's right, else it will break you. And it's not going to break me. It didn't break my mom. She didn't create me to be broken. So I'm trying to create a better city, a better country for people like my daughters, for the rest of our community, and somebody has to say something. And unfortunately, I don't see a lot of people talking about the root or the cause of where we're at. And so therefore, we never address it.
Okay, word association. Just thought of this. Use just popcorn words that come into your mind to describe how you view our culture, our society, right now? One word.
Ignorant.
Give me another word.
Divided.
I can't say I disagree. On both, those are very good, in my opinion, very good responses. So with that, ignorant and divided, if whatever the church is, I know the biblical definition of the church, but whatever the church is in the Sacramento area, if they were all assembled, probably could fit them in Golden One Arena, probably. They're all there, and Chief Daniel Hahn strides to the podium. You're addressing the church. What would you say?
Wake up. We are an amazing, amazing country, but we have problems, and we are going to implode from within unless we actually acknowledge and deal with those problems. You can see examples, if you know our history, you can see examples today how our history plays out today. I'll just give you a recent example. We had a tragic shooting at the Arden Fair Mall about a month and a half ago. Two young brothers, 17 years old and 19-year-old African-American brothers, were killed in about 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the mall in a shooting. And it was a young African-American, 18-year-old young man that did it. Now, the very next day, when all the information out was that just the race, the ages, and that they got shot in the mall in the middle of the day. And I watched comments in the media, comments on social media, comments on the internet that said things like, that's just savages versus savages. Wow. That's just the black culture. That's what happens when you don't have parents. Now, and that a lot of people proclaiming that it was gang-related. So it was my department that investigated, so I know a lot about this case. It was not gang-related. The kids that died had both parents. And last time I checked, I've lived in the black culture since the day I was born, and I must have missed the lesson that we were supposed to shoot each other in the mall. But you know, I guess you could make up an excuse and say, well, people said those things because it was a horrific shooting in the middle of the day, and anybody that does something like that is a savage and stuff like that. I guess you could stretch it and try to convince yourself of that. But unfortunately, 2 months earlier, a young white kid, 17 years old, from the suburbs of Chicago, drove to Kenosha, Wisconsin during a protest with his assault rifle. And he shot and killed 2 people in that protest. So roughly the same age, double murder, but one is black and one is white. The black shooting, savages, black culture, no parents. The shooting in Wisconsin, troubled childhood, maybe had some mental health issues, bullied in school, and we raised $2 million to bail him out of jail on a double murder charge. And just last week or the week before, there was an article about him going to a bar with his mom. He's 18 now. And I guess in Wisconsin, you can drink if your parents are with you. So he's drinking beer at a bar. He hooked up with the group Proud Boys, which is one of the groups, hate groups that's in our city. And he took pictures flashing white power hand signs. So why are those two different? One's black and one's white. Both double murders. And we talk about them. We don't know, these people I'm talking about don't know either one. They've never met the kids at the mall, and they've definitely never met Kyle Rittenhouse. Yet they've already concluded these completely disparate things based on race. And that is not by accident. That comes from our history. And the reason is we've never dealt with it. It's the same reason why we changed laws in 1877 to allow African Americans, the former slaves, to vote, yet they couldn't vote till 1965. Because we did not deal with the cause. The cause is, why don't we want black people to vote? Right. Let's deal with that. Because if we don't deal with that, then we'll find other ways to keep them from voting, even though the law says we must allow them to vote. So the same thing to this day. We can keep nibbling around the edges And we are going to continue to have people suffer, not reach their potential. And for those of us in this country that don't think it's important, we're falling behind other countries, China, India, because we are not fully utilizing the potential and the skill that this country possesses, because there's certain groups of people that we still don't treat as equals.
Well, Chief Hahn, boy, there's going to have to be a third session because I still have more questions, and I don't want to extend our time because our audience will probably have tuned us out, but I don't know why they would. You've said such a mouthful when you say, using the two adjectives, ignorant and divided. We are that. And it's easy to explain away things, based on race, based on parenting or whatever. It makes us feel better. I can define the issues, the boogeyman, if you will. And if I can, then it's like, okay, I sleep well at night. But as I like to say, folks don't like to hear me when I deal with the terminal nature of life. I said, when we wrap our minds around the fact that everyone dies and we prepare for that inevitability, then we are in better shape to live. But unless and until we know we're gonna die, we don't know how to live. Unless and until, to extend the metaphor to what you're saying, until we deal with the social, cultural, racial elephant in the room, we won't know how to live. And I would even submit that we will set ourselves back immeasurably by, as you said, nibble around the edges, ignoring the cancer, ignoring the disease, and it leads to death. Chief Hahn, thank you. Again, as I shared earlier, I'm praying for you.
Thank you.
Praying for your wife. I'm praying for your children. I'm praying for Sacramento, praying for your officers, that I'm like Dr. King in the sense that we'll get there one day. I pray that it's not an eschatological getting there, but it will be a lived out getting there in, if not my lifetime, maybe your lifetime. But we'll get there one day. I invite you all to continue to watch us on our podcast, Race, Culture, and the Church. Thank you so much for joining us today. And again, thank you so much, Chief Hahn.
Thanks for having me.